You feel it, don't you? The cold, heavy breath of this palace. These stones, ancient and steeped in power, they are more than mere rock and mortar. They are the silent witnesses, the keepers of 1,000 years of whispered truths and buried lies. They remember every shadow that ever danced across these gilded halls, every drop of ambition, every poison sip, every silk-clad betrayal. You believe you know these walls, don't you? You've charted the intricate dance of queens and concubines, seen the rise and fall of favorites, the brutal game played out beneath the sultan's indifferent gaze. A game of fragile alliances and ruthless ambition, where a woman's worth was measured by her proximity to the throne, her sons, her silence. For centuries, the rules were absolute, unyielding as the mountains beyond these gates. A bloodline meticulously preserved, a tradition as old as the desert winds. Women served, they bore, they faded. Their power, if it existed, was always hidden, always indirect, a whisper in the dark, never a roar. That was the silence, the unbreakable pact. But then, that sound. A tearing, sharp and brutal, through the heavy quiet of ages. It was not just silk, it was the very fabric of tradition, rending. It was the gasp of a world caught unprepared. Because within these walls, amongst these very stones that breathe secrets, one secret was forged that no one, not even the imperial mother herself, was meant to hear. A secret that spoke of a foreign slave, a woman plucked from the market dust whose audacity was a blade. She dared to shatter that millennium of silence, not with a whisper, but with a voice that echoed through every chamber, challenging the very foundations of this dynasty. Her defiance was a poison, seeping into the veins of the empire, a betrayal not just of a man, but of an entire celestial order. It unleashed a tempest of ambition, a bloody scramble for power unlike anything seen before. This slave, this solitary woman, held the thread that would unravel not one, but entire empires. What price, you wonder, for such a transgression? For daring to break the silence? Everything. Every single drop of blood, every tear, every fragment of a broken world. And it all began here, with that sound, and a woman who refused to be silent. The air, thick with frankincense and the ghost of jasmine, hung heavy within these gilded walls. Gold, hammered into intricate filigree, seemed to weep from every surface, catching the flicker of 1,000 lamps. Silk, in hues richer than any sunset, whispered against marble floors, beneath footsteps that dared not echo. This was the heart of an empire, a realm of intoxicating luxury built not just on conquest and plunder, but on something far more ancient, far more unyielding, tradition. For 1,000 years, this dynasty, forged in blood and prayer, had danced to a single immutable rhythm. Its very foundation lay not in the strength of its armies alone, but in the purity of its lineage, in the unbroken bloodline that flowed from Osman himself. And at the core of this sacred continuity lay a law, unspoken yet absolute, heavier than any crown. A concubine, no matter how favored, no matter how many princes she bore, could never ascend to the sacred station of a legal wife. Her blood, though it mingled with the sultan's in the veins of his heirs, was deemed unclean for the sultan's legitimate claim. A shadow, never the sun. This was the golden cage of the harem, a world of breathtaking beauty and suffocating confinement. Here, women, each a fragile blossom, existed for a solitary purpose, to perpetuate the dynasty. They were instruments, exquisite and vital, yet never truly sovereign over their own fates. Their power, if it could be called such, was a fragile thing, borrowed from the fleeting favor of a sultan or the promise of a male heir. A whispered word, a rival's gaze, a misplaced affection, and a life could wither, silent as dust beneath the silken rugs, a slow poison seeping into the grand tapestry. The game played within these walls was ruthless, a dance of subtle betrayal and calculated alliances, all within the strictures of this unyielding framework. This tradition, this heavy, ancient seal, pressed onto the scrolls of centuries, bound them all. Empress mothers, powerful Valide sultans, even the sultan himself, all were cogs in this grand, unyielding mechanism. Its weight was absolute, its authority unquestioned. A pact with the ancestors sealed in perpetuity. Can you feel the immense pressure of it, the centuries of expectation? Every movement, every breath within these hallowed halls was dictated. From the precise tilt of a head in deference to the measured cadence of a servant's step, to the very beating of a heart in hope or despair. And no one dared to contradict this ancient ironclad law. Not openly, not in truth. The silence of ages had grown deafening, a shroud woven from obedience and fear. A shadow world where the light of true agency had never been permitted to shine. A silence that promised to last another 1,000 years. Until her. The walls of the harem, they breathed history. Not just the scent of jasmine and rosewater, but the dust of 1,000 years of unbroken law. Here, every step was measured, every glance veiled, every whisper guarded. The Sultan's favor, a fleeting breeze, touched many, but settled on few. And never did it settle on one who dared to challenge the very air she breathed. She arrived amidst the countless others, a foreign current in a stagnant pool. Stripped of her name, her past, her very identity, she was given a new one, whispered like a secret. Alexandra, they called her, or Roxolana, if one dared to speak her new tongue. What did a name matter in a place where individuality was erased? She was a slave, a spoil of conquest, one grain of sand in an ocean of women, destined for the oblivion of the Sultan's endless affections. Or so they believed. But observe, if you dared to peer through the gilded lattice, if you risked the eunuch's whip for a glimpse into the forbidden gardens, she moved differently. Not with the bowed head of submission, nor the eager flutter of ambition, but with a quiet, undeniable presence, a shadow that held its own light. No one believed, few noticed, but behind her every glance, every smile, lay a will capable of moving mountains. A hidden force, barely stirring beneath the silk and subservience. It was during the procession, the weekly ritual where the Sultan, a demigod veiled in silk and gold, passed through the throng of his women. A moment of collective awe, of trembling hope, all eyes lowered, all backs bowed, but hers lifted. Not in defiance, not in blatant challenge. No, that would be madness. But in a moment, a fleeting breath, her gaze found his. And it lingered. Not a second too long for the casual observer, but an eternity for those who understood the language of power. A silent conversation, a question asked, an answer given, without a single word. What did he see? What did she convey? Not fear, not supplication, but perhaps understanding. A flicker of untamed spirit that mirrored his own burden of absolute rule. And in that instant, a fissure, fine as a spider's web, appeared in the granite of tradition. A hairline crack, unnoticed by the Valide Sultan, by the envious concubines, by the vigilant eunuchs. But it was there, and it would spread. Later, much later, as the Sultan retired, a single, embroidered silk scarf, its colors vibrant, foreign, was found near his path. Too conspicuous to be accidental, too subtle to be accusation. Its scent, a new fragrance, lingered in the air of the imperial bedchamber, an unseen declaration. No one should have seen this, no one should have known. A small detail, perhaps, but in this court, every detail was a prophecy. Every silence, a conspiracy. Every shadow, a dagger. And the game had only just begun. The air in these chambers, it hums with the scent of jasmine and the weight of ancient secrets. From behind this pillar, I have watched centuries unfold, empires rise and crumble like dust. But few tales possess the chilling elegance of this ascent. You see it, don't you? The shimmering silks, the flash of gold, the delicate filigree that adorns every surface. A palace built on dreams, yet its foundations are steeped in a different kind of reality: blood and ambition. She arrived a whisper, a footnote, a foreign slave plucked from the throngs. And in a world where a woman's worth was measured by her womb and her silence, she dared to listen, to learn, to think. The established order, 1,000 years of unbroken tradition, saw her as nothing more than chattel. They underestimated the mind that moved behind those eyes that watched the Sultan's every gesture, every fleeting mood, every weakness in the grand tapestry of the court. Her rise was not a conquest of armies, but a careful, brutal game of chess played on the bones of a dynasty. She did not wield a sword, she wielded intellect, a cunning that could unravel the tightest knot of power. A smile, a gaze, a precisely placed word, these were her weapons. A whispered promise in the bathhouse, a veiled threat delivered through a trusted servant, an alliance forged in the deepest shadows of the harem, only to be broken when its purpose was served. This was no noble war of banners and honor. This was the intimate, terrifying dance of survival. Imagine the grand feast halls, awash in candlelight, musicians playing melodies that soothe the soul. Yet beneath the silken robes, amidst the clinking of bejeweled goblets, poisons were brewed. Powder in the sherbet, a dagger in the shadow, a word whispered to a concubine. This was not war, this was chess, on the bones of those who stood on her path. The moralists will condemn her, call her ruthless, a serpent in paradise. But tell me, what mercy did this world offer a woman without power? To survive, to carve a destiny for herself and her children where none was allotted, she had to become a force of nature. Not good, not evil, just necessary. A predator in a garden of vipers. She learned early that weakness was a death sentence. Compassion, a luxury for those who could afford to lose. The choices were stark: be consumed or consume. And she chose the latter, with a chilling resolve that bent the very fabric of tradition to her will. Look closely at this scene. A beautifully adorned cup of sherbet. The crimson liquid within shimmers, promising sweetness, a cooling balm on a summer's day. But in her hands, in this court, it could be an offering of favor, a symbol of ascendancy, or the very vessel of an adversary's end. A single sip, a single decision, and the fate of an empire could tilt. Do you understand now the true meaning of power and the terrifying beauty of its cost? The dynasty, stretched thin as the finest silk, trembled under the weight of her ambition. And it would never be the same. The dust, you see, it truly did settle. The last tremors of a shattered order, they faded into the intricate patterns of the palace tiles. And then, a silence descended. Not the hush of respect, nor the quiet hum of subservience. No, this was a silence that rang, sharp and profound, heavier than any scream that had ever torn through these gilded halls. It was the silence of a universe recalibrating. 1,000 years. 1,000 years the bloodline flowed, pure and unchallenged by such defiance. 1,000 years the rules of succession, of consort, of power were as immutable as the stars above. And then, she. A foreign slave, purchased for coin, not born of noble houses. How does one break such iron chains? With silk, perhaps. With a smile that hid the sting of poison. With a will carved from obsidian. She stood. Not in the harem, a transient flower among many. Not in the shadow of the Sultan's fleeting affection. She stood as wife. Legal, bound by sacred vows. Her children, no longer merely sons of a concubine, but princes of the blood, untainted, legitimate heirs to an empire that stretched from dawn to dusk. What was the price of such triumph? Consider the whispers, ladies, the envy, thick as venom. The old traditions gutted like fish, their entrails laid bare for all to see. Was it worth it? For her? Yes. For the dynasty? Ah, that is the question that haunts the shadows still. Her victory was not just personal, it was an earthquake, a single, audacious act that shattered the very foundation of the Ottoman dream. The rules were rewritten, not with parchment and ink, but with sheer, unyielding will. A woman, a foreigner, a slave, she defied the very heavens, and in doing so, she carved a new path, not just for herself, but for every woman who would follow, for every future sultan, for the entire sweep of history itself. And when the dust settled and the whispers died, on the throne stood she, not a slave, not a concubine, the only one. And this world was never, truly, never again the same. Look closely at the empty throne, my ladies. Its shadow, it casts an entirely new pattern now. A pattern woven from ambition, silence, and the profound, terrible truth. Some rules, magnificent and ancient as they may be, were always destined to be broken.